he's not making it for the study session? All right, so it is 5:30 PM on Tuesday, February 20th, and I will call the study session to order. The study session is not being streamed, right? Yeah. Oh, it is being streamed. Okay, yes, it is.
It's just not being recorded, right?
We don't do minutes for it, but it's recorded and streamed.
Streamed. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. With us tonight is Ken Price with HR Green. We are going to go through the fiber study, and in this planning session, we're going to quickly go over where we've been, which will be just a little rehash for all of you since you've all been involved. And then our main goal at the end of this session is hopefully to receive some guidance from council on what direction they would like us to continue, if at all, with this process. So I will hand it off to Ken, and we'll get it started.
Thank you, Jay. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. Again, we sincerely appreciate you taking some time to meet with us this evening. In the interest of time, let's just jump right in. Briefly, here is what we are planning to cover this evening. The goal today is to provide a summary of the findings from Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3 of the study so Council can decide about next steps. We will start with an overview, as Jay said, of the completed Phase 1 vision tasks, and that will be followed by sharing an overview of the deliverables for the Phase 2 planning tasks and the Phase 3 partnership exploration tasks. And we will wrap up the presentation with a few brief recommendations for next steps. The remaining time today will be dedicated to Q&A and discussion with Council. Again, today's goal is to provide a summary of the findings from Phase 1, 2, and 3 of the study so you can decide what the next steps should be. Please know that we would like today's session to be more of an interactive conversation, so please feel free to share your thoughts, questions, and concerns as we proceed. These are the tasks that we completed as part of Phase 1, the vision phase of the project. The key findings from some of the Phase 1 vision tasks included an analysis of the current situation that indicated significant holes exist in RF coverage across the major carriers within the city. The Citizen Cellular Survey results showed a strong correlation to the RF coverage analysis. The Citizen Survey results also showed significant dissatisfaction with cell phone coverage, and the Citizen Survey results showed significant satisfaction with broadband services and speeds. 86% of the citizens surveyed indicated support for city involvement to fix the cellular issue. And the council survey results mirrored the public perception regarding the need for improved cellular services within the city. As council may recall during
Can I just
this,
ask quickly, how many people responded to the survey? How many responses did we get?
it was about, I think, 135, something like that. As council may recall, during the September 2023 vision session, we explored 3 possible solutions to improve cellular services in the community. The 3 possible solutions are city-owned towers and fiber, city-owned towers only, and policy only. These possible solutions will be referenced throughout the rest of this session. A vision statement and goals were developed based on City Council's discussions and direction from the September 2023 Vision and Goal Setting Workshop. The vision statement is, through partnerships and collaboration, the city endeavors to improve cellular coverage throughout its entire jurisdiction. Like water, sewer, and electricity, cellular service has become a basic necessity. By partnering with infrastructure and service providers, the council strives to improve the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens by providing comprehensive cellular coverage throughout the entire city. And the goals are to implement a telecommunications solution that provides reliable citywide cell phone coverage and that providers will utilize. To locate towers on city-owned property or rights-of-way when possible. To ensure that towers do not exceed the maximum height permitted in city code, and if needed, provide city council the necessary language to modify the code. To engage with potential partners to ensure the design solution meets all their needs and requirements, and to utilize an RFEI process to establish one or more public partnerships. In line with one of the possible solutions and one of the visioning goals, we reviewed Chapter 20 of City Code and shared recommended revisions with staff. We also developed a wireless communication facilities design and installation standards manual. Currently, staff and the city attorney's office are reviewing the Chapter 20 revisions as well as the standards manual. The standards manual will be incorporated by reference into the code, and when the revisions are finalized, Chapter 20 will come before you, City Council, for further review. Leveraging the results of the existing RF conditions report and the key decisions made in the vision sessions, 2 optional proposed cellular 5G tower designs were created. This is the first of the 2 proposed optional designs. This tower network design and RF coverage map shows 3 100-foot monopoles for 3 candidate tower locations on public park property. There's enough space for all 4 carriers on the top of each of the 100-foot towers, so only 1 tower is required at each of the 3 candidate locations. This map also includes several existing tower locations. Please know that the 3 100-foot towers in combination with the existing towers will provide the most comprehensive cellular coverage throughout the entire city. It is important to note that City Code currently only allows 70-foot poles on public property, so the city may want to consider modifying its code to permit 100-foot poles.
Could you point out, sorry, on that map, if you could go back?
Sure.
To just point out which ones are the 3 proposed new poles versus the ones that are already there?
Sure. So if you look pretty much dead center to the north, there's a big white thumbtack in the middle.
Yes.
Okay, that's candidate location number 2.
Okay, that's 3 Pond Park.
Yes. And then if you look just northeast of here, or northwest of here, City Park, you'll see candidate location number 1.
Yep,
And then if you look south, that is Woody Hollow.
Woody Hollow, okay, thank you. Oh, I see now, they say candidate, that's so small, I can't read that.
Sure.
Yes. Yes, okay.
And we'll cover those 3 locations here in just a second. So for comparison, here's a photo simulation of a proposed 100-foot tower next to the existing 45-foot tower near City Park, the one right behind us. Here's a photo
Just to
simulation.
note, that's not a proposed spot,
Yes.
just for comparison.
Comparable, right.
Just for comparison, correct. Thank
With
you.
the old fire station.
Here is a photo simulation of a 100-foot tower located at the Candidate 1 tower site, City Park. And here is a photo simulation of a 100-foot tower located at the Candidate 2 tower site, which you identified already as 3 Pond Park. And then here is the photo simulation of the 3rd tower, and that's at Candidate Location 3, which is Woody Hollow Park.
Can we go back a couple pages to the City Park, the first slide? That one. So that's looking kind of east with the tracking pad going into the new country club-owned property across the creek there? Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's the northwest corner.
Yes,
Yes,
that's, the city owns a little sliver
Right,
on the other side of the drainage.
Right.
That's not improved.
okay, thank you.
This chart shows the estimated construction costs for the three 100-foot monopole tower design based on industry standard costs. The cost per tower includes construction costs only. It does not include the cost of cellular radios, antennas, etc. These costs are covered by the carriers. As shown, the estimated total cost is approximately $900,000. If the city decides to invest $900,000 to construct the three 100-foot towers, then based on financial modeling of the potential return on that investment, the city could expect to break even by the fourth year. This is the second of the two
I'm sorry, can
proposed.
you back up a minute?
Absolutely.
Is that assuming the city owns and operates the towers?
Not necessarily. Owns, yes, but operates not necessarily.
Okay.
What's the revenue source that leads to the break even?
That's yet to, it's the lease of the space on the towers. So if you see right there, it says 4 providers on each tower at $2,500 a month. So that would be the lease rate. That would be your revenue source.
And that assumes we get 4. We'll probably hear a little bit later, we may only get 2 or 3 if we build the towers. So you're going to, I think, hear some further dialogue about possibility of us not even building or paying for or owning the towers. So, sorry, continue.
Absolutely. Good questions. Thank you.
Quick question, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Is $2,500 a month considered to be a market rate?
Yes. Yeah. We had some experts in this market share with us what those potential costs, what we could charge. Absolutely. Any other questions? Okay. This is the second of the 2 proposed optional cellular 5G designs. This tower network design and RF coverage map shows 6 70-foot monopoles for the 3 candidate tower locations on public park property. Each of the 70-foot towers can only support up to 2 carriers at the top of the tower. So there will need to be 2 70-foot towers at each of the candidate tower locations to ensure that there is enough space for up to 4 carriers at each of the 3 locations. This map also includes several existing tower locations. Please know that while the 6 70-foot towers, in combination with the existing towers, will significantly improve cellular coverage throughout the city, it will not provide the same level of coverage as the 3 100-foot towers in combination with the existing towers. So this again is a...
Sorry, one more question
Absolutely.
on that last one. So in the prior map that you showed us with the 3 towers, there were a bunch of smaller dots, smaller white dots, right?
Those are, yeah, and those are still on here.
Yeah, Susan, you just
Existing
can't,
towers.
They just don't show up as well.
they're still there.
Oh,
You just,
they're
you're
just
right, though.
red.
There were
Okay.
dots on the other map, but they're not.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
that's fine.
I'd like to point out, the blue is, you didn't see that much blue on the first map. So it was down towards, Glenmore was the worst still, but here you'll see it expands the, it's still coverage, it's just not as good of coverage.
I think it's actually easiest to see if you look at that monitor over there. From a distance, the colors are pretty, you can
Or
see
up
the
here, yeah,
blues
or-
and,
Or
yeah.
behind us.
Yeah.
The blue, which is all the way on the south side of the city, is much more prevalent using the 70-footers than it is using 3 100-footers.
Sure.
Very little blue.
Yeah.
Just at your house, Al.
Yeah, Glenmore, Cherry Hills Farm, yeah.
But I guess the question that I see immediately is if Woody Hollow, it seems to me like we're talking about putting this down in the bottom of Woody Hollow, would any of that blue go away for that? I guess what I'm saying, I look at the south as being the biggest part of the city that is being affected by the lesser coverage with the smaller towers. If you moved Woody Hollow Park back up towards that blue, would you still get the coverage in that southwestern part that's covered by Woody Hollow, but make some of that blue go away?
I think the photo sim that we saw earlier was just a photo sim in that particular part of the park. When the towers are actually installed, they will try to find the highest point close to wherever they're going to install it, and that's where they will install it. And I suspect that on this map that you're seeing before you, that they plotted that from the highest point in the park.
And Councilor Eber, I might point out that we did look at placing one closer to Glenmore, but when we did the final RF analysis, this is the spot that made the most impact overall.
And we also looked at doing one all the way on the very west side of the village along Clarkson
On
as well.
Clarkson.
The problem with that is that if you put one up all the way at Clarkson, you're basically broadcasting a signal to half of it's get broadcast to Inglewood.
Jay, isn't there a tower between Glenmore and the farm? Isn't there a tower?
Yes, there's smaller towers that don't show up on here.
They don't show up on
30-foot
this.
towers don't show up. The bigger towers are on the churches on Colorado up north, and then Kent Denver has a 40 or 40.
Are those towers actually in use?
Yes,
The smaller towers?
yes. They just don't show up because those are single carrier towers.
And they are the older technology that can't be upgraded. So let's talk a little bit about the 70-footers, just so you have some idea of what those look like. So again, here is the comparison of the 70-foot tower against the 45-foot tower. And this is a photo sim of the 70-foot towers, plural, located at Candidate 1 tower site, which is the city park. And the same two towers at the Candidate 2 location, 3 Pond Park. And 2 towers at the Candidate 3 location, Woody Hollow Park. This chart shows the estimated construction costs for the 6 70-foot tower design based on industry standards again. And the cost again represents construction only. It does not reflect cost of the cellular radios, et cetera. That's again borne by the carriers. As shown, the estimated total cost is approximately $1.5 million.
So if I can ask just a quick question about that, I understand that these towers only hold 2 carriers each, and so to accommodate 4 major carriers, we'd need 2 each. But I know that we're working on getting commitments from carriers. If we only get commitments from 2 carriers, maybe this would be a little short-sighted, but if we only get commitments from 2 carriers, I guess in theory, we could only build 1, right?
Yeah, that'd be very short-sighted, though.
Yeah.
You identified the problem. I mean, because at some point, we build this infrastructure, somebody's going to build this neutral host provider or the city. Eventually, T-Mobile is going to call and say, okay, we're ready. We'd like to go on. And at that point, we built one 70-footer. We got to go through the process again to get one more carrier put up. So I think it's either go
Well, I'm
for it
just
with 2
wondering, yeah, I don't know.
or build the 100-footer.
I don't know if we're in this position at all, but it seems to me that might be a reason to be one of the first 2.
To do 100-footers, you mean?
No, to do, if we build one, if we only get commitments from 2 carriers, so we put in 1 tower each, then the 3rd and 4th carriers are kind of under a little bit of pressure. In theory, they'll start losing customers to the 2 that have better coverage. And maybe there's incentive for them to contribute to the cost of the construction of additional towers somewhere down the road.
Why wouldn't we just bite the bullet and put in the hundreds?
Because I don't know that the community, I don't know, but because I think 70-foot will be more palatable for our residents. But
So 70 feet are currently allowed inside of our zoning code. If we were to go with 70s, Mayor, do you envision not asking our citizens permission to put up 70s? I know we still have the ballot question we'd have to go to the citizens about the 5-year max on current leases within the city. Do we all know about that? Do I need to, we're all?
Yeah, no, I think we're
Okay.
on that same page. I don't know, I haven't given it a ton of thought to think all the way through, but it would make things simpler that yeah.
I know,
But
you're right.
It's just,
Can we
I'm
let Ken
just,
finish?
Well,
Yes.
but I think Dan makes a point. That the economics dictate to do the hundreds. There's no question about that, looking at these numbers.
And
That all may be, the economics may all be moot anyway if the neutral host providers flipping the bill for it, whether they're 70s or hundreds, which I
Right.
think we'll hear about here as well.
and I think the economic argument, if only 2 carriers are gonna come on board, then building building 3 70-foot towers is less expensive than building 3 100-foot towers. Right. But it is less expensive, and if there was an opportunity then later to say to carrier number 3, gee, so sorry you didn't get on board when you had the chance, now, I don't know.
I don't like that, but,
I don't know. I don't know that I like it either. I'm just saying.
all right, let's hear the
keep
rest of
going.
this.
it's worth noting that the cellular market is highly, highly competitive. So chances are, and this is what we're hearing, chances are if one of these providers commit, the other 3 will commit almost immediately because it's so competitive. So, all right, again, so $1.5 million. If the city decides to invest that $1.5 million in the construction of the 6 towers, then based again on the financial modeling of the potential return on that investment, excuse me, the city could expect to break even by the 5th year. The ability to leverage federal, state, and regional grants and programs can substantially facilitate the cost of a network build-out. However, after exploring various funding programs, it seems that upcoming grant opportunities are generally not available for cellular infrastructure. Additionally, Cherry Hills Village is for the most part considered served for last-mile connections via wireline internet options such as coax and fiber. So the city is ineligible for NTIA, BEAD, and USDA broadband funding programs. Please note that served is defined as speeds of at least 100 megabits down and at least 20 megabits up. There are other funding options that the city could consider, including the city funding and owning the towers, or a third-party funding and owning the towers.
When you say other options, the option that you're, the first bullet about city funded and owned, that's what we've been contemplating here for the last 30 minutes, right? Okay.
Yeah. Identifying interested partners was an important step to help the city envision a path forward. The approach used to engage with potential partners and other interested parties included developing, publishing, and processing responses to a request for expressions of interest, or an RFEI. The city's RFEI was posted October 17th on the city's bid system. Responses were due on December 1st. The city received 4 viable responses to its RFEI. Excuse me. They were from Aero Wireless Group, Newcom, Telegistics, and Zayo. To help the city better understand the 4 proposals and to possibly narrow down the list of potential partners, all 4 responders were interviewed. For this proposed project to be successful, staff decided that the city should have at least 2 major carriers committed to the project. So, the exploration of partnerships included an outreach effort to all 4 major carriers to determine their potential interest in participating in the proposed project. To conclude the presentation, Here are recommended next steps based on the key outcomes from discussions with council and staff, as well as the findings shared throughout this study. Number one, it is recommended that the city move forward with the 3 100-foot tower design. Number two, it is important to note that City Code currently only allows 70-foot poles on public property or public rights-of-way. So it is recommended that the city modify its code to permit 100-foot poles. To secure carriers for the poles, a lease must be signed that allows for their telecommunications equipment to be placed in city parks. In general, carrier leases last at least 20 years or potentially longer. The city's charter in Article 3, Section 3.9 currently limits leases on public property to no more than 5 years, including extensions. It is recommended that the charter be amended to allow carrier leases of longer than 5 years. The amendment would need to be approved by voters within the city. Number four, it is recommended that the city initiate contract negotiations with one or more of the RFE responders to construct, operate, manage, and maintain, as well as potentially own the proposed tower network. Number five, if the city decides to own the towers, then it is recommended that the city initiate lease negotiations with the carriers to place their equipment on the towers. Number six, if the city decides to own the towers, then it is recommended that the city initiate the process to secure funding to construct the towers. Number seven, if the city decides to own the towers, then it is recommended that the city initiate the process of developing the low-level design of the planned tower network, which is necessary to create associated construction and permitting plan sets. And number eight, if the city decides to own the towers, then once one or more partner contracts are finalized, carrier leases are negotiated, funding is secured, and the low-level design is completed, then it is recommended that the city begin the deployment of the cellular tower infrastructure. Again, it is important to note that recommendations 5, 6, 7, and 8 are only applicable if the city decides to own the towers. So that concludes the presentation. The remaining time today will be dedicated to Q&A and a discussion with council. Again, today's goal was to provide a summary of the findings from phase 1, 2, and 3 of the study so council can decide about next steps. Please note that as an outcome from today's discussion, staff is seeking council direction on moving forward with securing contracts with one or more partners, or we'll call them neutral hosts, moving forward with agreements with any carriers, deciding if the city should own the towers, and directing staff to begin the process to have an election on the charter amendment and gather residents' input on the 70 and 100-foot towers.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with the questions or clarifications, and then we can kind of go through these questions to provide direction.
If we do not own the towers, are we licensing them to the 4 parties that you mentioned there, or do we license them to carriers, or what's the, help me with the mechanics of not owning a tower.
So if we wouldn't own it, then we would simply lease the space to the neutral host, and then they would have agreements with the carriers.
Which is kind of what we have now.
We
right?
could still have some sort of income. It would be less than if we own the towers, because then we'd be leasing that 4 times. If we just lease the land, we would lease the land at a market rate to the neutral host, and then they would have agreements with all of the 4 providers.
What's the market rate on those leases for land then?
We don't have that exact information right now. We wouldn't want to, we'd be able to make some money on it. We wouldn't want to mark it up so high that now the neutral host is charging the carriers too much, and then They don't want to come in because all of a sudden they're paying double market rate but we can look into what just the land is. For example, I think we make about, don't quote me, $1,500 or $1,700 a month right now for the tower at the old fire station.
So if we do not own the tower, they get the lease income from the carriers.
Correct.
We get the lease income from the neutral host.
Yes.
They pay the cost of construction, but they'll expect us to finance it?
No.
No, they
would
Bring in
pay the
all
cost.
three neutral hosts. If we don't want to own those towers, we would stay hands out. All we would do is lease them the land. They would have construction costs, maintenance, upkeep, and normally they will bring in fiber, or the carriers may bring in their own fiber. Fiber's a little touchy. Some of them like to have a certain provider. Others will take, any fiber that's in the area and lease that. That's a separate issue altogether with fiber.
So I think the way that I was thinking about it, and correct me if I'm wrong, I was trying to put it into a context that I have more familiarity with. Like, if I owned a house that I wanted to rent out, I can either rent it out myself, and then I find the tenants, and I negotiate the lease with them, and when the yard needs to be mowed, I go hire the landscaper to come do that, and if the plumbing breaks, I go over there myself to address that. Or I can hire a property management company. I still own the house, but now I'm paying somebody to do all that, to find the tenants, to negotiate the leases, to do all of the maintenance. I make less because I'm not, I'm paying them to do a lot of the work. And so that's kind of the neutral host model. We'd make less, but, we wouldn't have,
Yeah, if we decided to own, we would then have to hire a quote-unquote property manager. We would need a neutral host or somebody that knows how to do the maintenance and upkeep and all of that, because we don't have that staff in-house.
and has the connections with the carriers and
Yeah.
yeah.
And so,
And the connections with the carriers is actually a good point, because it throws us into a new realm of having to execute leases with carriers as well. And that can get tricky, right? You're dealing with those big cell providers and trying to make sure that we don't get taken with those carriers and getting the best deals we can. I mean, it brings us into a whole new realm of negotiations as a landlord if we are going to be the owner of those towers.
Well, let me ask a question. If we're going to own the towers, what's our capital reserves that we could spend $900,000? Has anybody looked at that?
yeah, we have the reserves to
We have sufficient reserves to do
pay
this.
cash for that, yeah.
If we want to go ahead and proceed and we own the towers, we've got the resources to do it.
Yes.
Okay.
So if we own the towers, and we talked about the $2,400 a month per carrier, 25 per carrier, that's gross. What are our expenses in hiring whoever's going to manage those towers for us? Do we know?
We
Probably don't know until we develop a partnership agreement.
yeah.
Do we have an idea?
Are these towers something that require a lot of maintenance? I mean, we're not maintaining the actual the cell connections, we're maintaining a tower. Is there a lot of maintenance with that?
I can't really answer that question. We didn't really dig into the monopoles. We spent quite a bit of time talking about monopines. One of the reasons we didn't advise you to go that direction was the monopines do have a lot of maintenance, whereas the monopoles have less maintenance.
There's
Also,
probably
we'd
not
also
a
have
ton,
the,
but
I
it's
think
the-
we'd also have the last mile, right, of fiber, whatever connections we need to make to get to the parks. As the tower owners, we'd also be the fiber constructors potentially.
Well, potentially. Most likely, it would be us again getting into that negotiation with the fiber provider, because we don't want to own fiber, at least in staff's recommendation. Fiber's very technical and you're 24/7 on call, because if that fiber accidentally gets cut and nobody has cell service, we can't say we're working on it. We have, so we would not recommend owning fiber in any situation. And we've talked to fiber providers and also the cell providers. They would really prefer to have their own fiber.
So while I like the proposition of, paying for itself optimistically in 4 years, but in some time frame, and then having a revenue stream, that's appealing to me. But in the back of my head, I'm reminded of our sewer systems and all of the areas where we have said, that's not our area of expertise, and
And I think that's important, Katie, because the issue is that if you step back even before this, there would have never been a problem, and we wouldn't have owned anything. Our issue has been, is that our neutral carriers and the people that are out there that we don't pay for now haven't been able to extend it. Had they been able to extend it, and our coverage was good, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all. The issue is saying, hey, so what, and we've then taken on and said, what do we need to do to try to provide cell phone coverage to our people? Now, looking at that, there's an opportunity. You don't ever just ignore an opportunity to generate revenue, but that's not why we're doing this. Again, had the cell phone guys and the towers done what they need to do originally, like they've done in every other area, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all, and we wouldn't be in this business. There wouldn't be anything going on other than the lease rates that we get for the, for the neutral carriers.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we need to be at the end of the day. I mean, if the dollars all of a sudden drove so far over, yeah, you might look at it at that point in time, but the issue is that that's not a business that I don't think the city wants to get into. I don't think that it's what we want to expand our staff to be able to start to do. The only thing that you want to make sure of is that we have the appropriate hooks in whoever's, got those towers, that they're maintained aesthetically, et cetera, to our standards, and we can make them, make sure that they're what they need to be from that perspective. But that's kind of where I come from at the end of the day.
so I'm hearing a little bit of a consensus that maybe we don't want to own the towers, or there are other,
No, I disagree. I think
Okay.
maybe we do. And you raise the issue of tree towers. We don't have any examples of those, do you?
you've seen them, right?
We've
The
seen them, but
monopile.
you don't have it with
I'm a
100
tree.
foot to see what
They're
a
big.
100-foot tree looks
The
like.
reason we kind of took them out of the lineup here is they're big maintenance issues, and they require replacement of those branches all the time because they get
Yeah, it's like- I think
sun-beaten and wind-beaten.
One carrier told us that the ones they own, every 3 years, they have to replace those.
Those branches.
Not all of them, but a majority of them, due to sun and damage. They're no longer green after 3 years. And so,
Yeah.
and I still haven't seen a design that really looks like a tree yet.
Well, and given that we don't have any 100-foot trees, I mean,
So- Is it staff's recommendation that we not own? Does staff have a,
Yeah, staff would recommend that we do not get into the ownership side of it. And
guess
that
Mike-
we operate a single lease with a neutral host and let them worry about the fiber and the carriers and all of that. And we simply collect our rent for the park property and make sure we have the correct hooks, so if it needs painted or something needs done, that we can go in and make sure that it's up to our standards.
Rob?
I guess I'm not so sure I agree with that, because I'm not sure that I have all the information to make that decision. But, right now we make $1,700 a month or whatever it is from a shorter pole. If your comment earlier is $2,500 a month times 4, you're making 10 grand a month versus $1,700 a month. The question is what's it going to cost to maintain a pole? The way I envision this happening is we own a pole we're still going to contract with an independent party who's going to negotiate with the four parties and charge us a fee for having done that. And at the end of the day, those four parties, hopefully four, are going to pay the city that $10,000 a month.
Less whatever.
So less minus the maintenance. So we don't know what the maintenance is right now to be able to make that call of whether or not that's worth it. But I still envision that we're going to pay a fee to a third party to negotiate that deal with the carriers, and then they're gone. Don't the
Is that the
carriers
way
at that
that
point take care of their
works?
own stuff?
They
And
take
we
care of-
just take care of the
They take care
pole?
of the antennas on the pole.
They take
But-
care of the antennas, we take care of the pole, and the
Fiber.
independent company is
Fiber's up in the
gone.
air.
Or the, what do we call it, the non,
The
Neutral.
The neutral
Neutral
the
host.
host.
neutral party is at that point gone.
I don't
So
know that, is that the way that works?
is that the,
Well-
am I missing something?
If we owned them, we wouldn't call it a neutral party that we worked with. It would be a maintenance company, which the neutral parties do that also. So it would more than likely be the same company that you'd negotiate to build the towers for you and then manage those towers for you, even if we owned them.
But are there companies who are willing to come in and bring all the carriers to the table for some flat fee and then just walk away? Or do they want a cut of the deal?
We
that-
haven't looked at structuring a deal like that. The way we talked to them was either we pay them to build the towers and manage the towers, or we let them do it all. We haven't talked about a third party just to negotiate the leases for us, build the towers, and then walk away.
But when you say build and manage, are they managing the tower or are they managing the carrier's equipment?
Just the tower, not, the leases for the carriers would still be with us.
Right, so that's what, I don't know that what you just said is different than when I say build and manage. I mean, yeah, we're not gonna be out there painting the pole. We're gonna hire this contractor to build and manage our pole.
Right, but then we've got to go find all the carriers and negotiate the leases with them and bring them to the table and
So-
get their equipment on the pole.
This neutral doesn't do that or
Well,
there
that,
isn't
a neutral,
If I understand it correctly, the neutral
Host provider.
host is a company like Zayo. The business that Zayo is in is they go around the country and they consider, would I like to build a pole here? And that'll be dependent upon the cost of securing the space and their ability to go find tenants. The big three carriers plus you've got Dish. So if they can fill up that pole, or if they can get 2 out of 3 spots or something like that, maybe that makes sense for them. But they're the in effect the property owner, not the ground, but the pole owner, and they're the lessor to the carriers. who
And that's
would
how
be
they
the
make their money.
lessees. Yeah, and they make their money on the spread between what they can charge the carriers for rent and all that. So that's that neutral host. Now, I think we're talking about a sub portion of that work, which is the maintenance of the pole, as something apart in the event we owned it. Could we subcontract that out? But I wouldn't, that's different than neutral host.
but they're not gonna bring, I don't think, I don't have any experience in this field, but I don't think their financial model is such that they would bring all the people to the table and then give the leases to us.
Correct.
Wouldn't they be paid a brokerage
That's
fee?
their business, they're a lessor.
Right, that's how they
We could
make,
probably get a
Would it be a
cut of the
brokerage fee
lease.
we pay them to do that? I would assume.
I don't know, I
don't think we know.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
does anybody
Well, that's
know
why I said
if that's
I
how
can't
they
make a
work? I don't,
When we sat down with them, none of them brought up that business model. They either wanted to build the towers at our cost and then everything else is on us, negotiating with all the, or we just let them do it all, own they would finance the towers, build the towers, negotiate all of the leases. There was no hybrid in there of, will you build the towers and negotiate all the leases for us and then just turn over.
Just because this can be a profit center for the city, I'm not sure means it should be a profit center for the city. If we have a mandate from our residents to improve cell coverage, I think we need to first and foremost look to get that done. And if we can, augment it with some revenue without causing staff a whole bunch of consternation for, the next 20 or 30 years and our successors up here, I think that's great if we can. I seem to think that and it sounds like they're out here, they're saying that the easier button, and easier is not necessarily the right button, but easier button is to push the neutral host provider button, have them come in, build that last mile of fiber, have them build the towers, have them negotiate the leases, have them work with the carriers on coming out and installing their equipment on those towers. And all we do is collect our check each month for leasing them the space in our park.
Yeah.
It's a 10 by 10 pad plus the transformer equipment that we talked about. I love the idea of making this a revenue source for the city more than just leasing them the pad for the tower. I don't want to get this process bogged down and hung up on trying to make it a revenue source and not really seeing the forest through the trees here.
Yeah.
I want to get the cell coverage fixed.
I don't disagree with you, with the exception of the fact that it sounds like the model that I was talking about is not one of the ones, and I'm still not hearing, and it can't become at least one of the discussion points of an option. If you tell me I'm full of hooey, okay, I go away, and then we're back to these two. But I don't know if there's, for a fee, you say, come do this and then leave, and then they turn around and go, oh, we would never do that. Well, then, of course, it goes back to nothing, to the other two options. But if there's a third option that, just because we haven't talked about it yet, doesn't mean we might not want to talk about it.
Yeah. I suspect, I don't know, I suspect you're full of hooey. But you're right, that I guess it couldn't hurt to ask. But I think that is, I don't think there's a real profit in it for them. But, I think we should ask that. But I do want to, I want to be sensitive to time. We have about 10, 12 minutes left, and we do have some other questions. So it seems like maybe we're kind of on different pages. I think I know where everybody is except for maybe Susan. How are you feeling about the?
I think we partner with a neutral host and we don't own the towers. I just don't see, notwithstanding what the answer to the question might be that you ask, I don't see us being an operator of cell towers. I don't think it just doesn't make sense for the city to do that in my book, regardless of the profit motive. I just.
Well,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure the profit motive is all that compelling because one could have no numbers, so this is just hypothesis. But we're subscale. I mean, 3 towers, and these guys do this stuff for a living. So if we were able to charge the increment for the ownership of the towers, we might eat that up in maintenance, where they could own them and operate at scale and make a profit at it. And I don't think the consulting model would work because they're looking at a 25-year time horizon, and we're going to make all this money on those leases, and so we can go ahead and put them up. If they're going to do all that work up front, my guess is that the consulting fee to capitalize that revenue stream would be pretty hefty. I don't think it's a business we're in, and I don't think we can operate at scale, so I don't see a big benefit.
So I see Earl nodding,
May-
Randy's there, Dan's there, Susan's there, Al, where are you?
Here's my question. I think we got a chicken and egg issue here. Let's say we go find the neutral host, everything's good, and we go out and find out they don't want us to do 100-foot towers. Where are we? We're spinning our wheels, getting this all done. It's a chicken and egg. I think we need to know, and I think the consensus here is the 100-foot towers.
I think
If you look at the coverage.
we're going to dictate to the neutral host provider that we want 100 feet.
Exactly. But do we have to go get citizens' input, get the vote? What if the vote turns us down? Then we're
Well,
Spinning on wheels.
That's a whole, that's the
yeah,
next
so
topic.
so I think where we are, I think we're in the, we've got 5 people who are in the neutral host camp, 2 who maybe aren't. But let's talk about that for a second. Skipping down to the 70-foot, 100-foot. Obviously, 100 feet would require changes to our code. They both require charter amendments. In my opinion, I think the only way any kind of charter amendment passes or goes through, if we put a charter amendment on the ballot, that will create a belief within our community that something is about to happen. And so if we have to get somebody on board first, in my opinion, it's got to be the carriers before we get 6,000 residents. I think we need to get 4 carriers on board before we try to get 6,000 residents. Because if we go to the residents and say, would you approve a charter amendment for 100-foot towers? Here's what they would look like. Here's the kind of coverage they would give, et cetera, et cetera. We go through all of that effort, they pass it, and then we say, oh, psych, they're not interested in that after all. That to me is worse. It is a little bit of a chicken and an egg, but in my opinion, that is worse than negotiating with carriers.
Well, it is worse, but what
And
are
then
you guys
losing.
finding out about that? I mean, where do we stand? And again, 0 and 100, but I mean, I recognize, where do we stand right now with regard to saying, hey, we're going forward with 100-foot. We expect you guys to commit. In fact, we expect you guys, what we'd like you to do is to commit and say, if this thing passes in November, that it locks in the deal. It's contingent upon passing, and when it passes, you're locked in, and loaded. End of discussion.
And I believe we can do that with a neutral host. If we go out, find our neutral host, this is who we're going to use. Everything's contingent upon the vote. The neutral hosts, most of them, if not all that we've talked to already, would prefer the 100-foot towers as to the 70s. So would the carriers, they get a lot more bang for their buck.
But again, our contingency, if they vote it down, we're out.
We're out.
But if they vote it in, negotiations are over.
Yes, and I think we could.
The guys are locked and loaded. Contracts are in.
With a neutral
They're
host and
effective.
not necessarily.
Well, but we would also want to negotiate with the neutral host at the same time and say, okay, if the vote's yes, you're 100% in. If the vote's yes, we'll build the towers once you have 2 signed up. But right now, the problem we're finding is everyone's wishy-washy until we know if we can build 100-foot towers and we can put them on parkland. Nobody's wanting to.
And I guess where I am is that we have a neutral host currently, Crown Castle. And what we have been told for years is that they can't get any carriers. And in my opinion, we can't do anything until we know that if we build it, they will come.
Yeah. Well, and the reason they can't get carriers is because there's no place to put towers right now. They can do 30-foot towers in the rights of way.
Okay.
And the carriers aren't wanting to do that because our population is so spread out that one tower may get 10 new houses.
Right, okay.
So they're not committing because we currently don't have any place where we can put 70-foot towers or 100 if we change the
But
code.
that's our problem, and I agree with Katie. I think, and Earl for that matter, if we can solve our problem, are you prepared to commit or not, Mr. Carrier?
Yeah.
I think that's a legitimate question, and I'm sort of struggling because, I don't know about Dish and their cell. I know they're a very aggressive company. They do things, well, and I've got a lot of respect for them. But I would guess they're sort of low single digit in terms of market share, and that we really got to focus on the Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile to, if our objective is to make a difference in coverage for the residents, I think you got to have those guys basically committed, like, if we get this done, you commit or no? Where are you?
So I think that's fair, and I think what I am hearing as a consensus in regard to these questions is that we probably should go with the 300-foot towers, and so I think we are now in a place where we could go to them and say, if we build this, 300-foot towers in these et cetera,
In or out?
are you in or out? We'll need to go to a vote of our people. If that passes, are you in for sure? And then I think that the other three questions are, I don't think anyone here has said that they want the city negotiating directly with carriers. We're all in agreement there.
Correct for me. Yeah.
And so the only outstanding question around the neutral host / ownership of the towers is whether or not the model that Rob is talking about is a possibility. And it seems like that might be a fairly easy question to get answered. But it sounds to me like if that's not an option, then nobody wants to, since we don't want to be negotiating with the carriers directly, that would push us into the neutral host, and the neutral host owns the towers model.
Let me see if I can jump in real quick.
Yeah.
When we last spoke to the residents, we didn't know 60, we didn't know 70, we didn't know 100. Yeah, it may be easier at some point to corral 6,000, but I'm thinking they don't have a clue what we're talking about tonight. And maybe the residents, maybe we need to have another open house to say, look, we've narrowed it down to either 70 or 100. Which do you all think is the next step forward? Because where I'm going is, how many houses can see a 100-foot tower, but they can't see a 70-foot tower versus seeing a no-foot tower, and we don't do anything? But then you have the same continuation of poor cell service. I'm not sure in my district, which includes the north and the east of Three Pond Park, everybody's going to be looking down on a 100-foot tower, and they may or may not hate it. I don't know. They may be looking at a 70-foot tower, hate it. They may say a 70 is good, but a 100 stinks. I don't know. But people now need to understand this is where we think they're going to go, and this is how many houses are going to be able to see it. And do you still want cell service under these parameters? Because they may tell us right there on the spot, no.
So I agree with you, but the caveat I would throw in there, and I do think that a 100-foot tower might be a little bit of a sticking point. But I also feel like, again, we need to stay focused on what the objective of this project is. And the reality is that the 70-foot towers help a lot of people, but there are still people excluded from that. And I don't know that I feel comfortable moving forward with a solution that still leaves people out of the equation. So I do feel like we need to say, this is the plan that we feel serves the community the best. And if you don't like it, I understand we won't move forward. But I think that we need to have the commitment from the carriers first, because as soon as we go back to the community with, here's a design, and here's how it addresses the problem, yes or no, if they say yes, and then we can't deliver, that's a problem.
Real problem.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and that's where I go a little bit, real quick, Randy, sorry, is I want to make sure, though, that somewhere I didn't understand, and this might be me, that we were guaranteeing, and I just mentioned to Earl, we should pick our 3 100-foot towers regardless of whether or not they're parkland or private land, because we can lease somebody's private land if there's a better place for a tower. And So that eliminates the whole charter piece. We should be picking this based on science of where these three go, not just because the city owns it. So this idea that it has to be on park property, I don't know that I agree that we made that decision.
Well, that's a whole nother discussion, unfortunately, at 6:30. Randy, what
I
did
got
you
a
think?
30-second one, maybe less. We've kind of glossed over this fiber thing, at least in terms of my understanding. And I'd like to understand that better, maybe through Jay or something like that. You know, it's just not going to magically appear. Who's doing it? How much is it? Who's going to pay for it? Where does it fit in this scheme of things? But that's, let me defer the answer to that for later.
Okay, well, hopefully that's as clear as mud for the staff. And
What's the direction?
Yeah, that's what I was.
okay, so I think the direction is that we are leaning towards a neutral host and not owning the towers. There are 2 out of 7 who still have some reservations about that, but we're leaning in that direction. We don't want to have the city making any agreements with carriers directly. Whether or not the city should own the towers, that in my mind is the same as the neutral host question. So we're there. And then I think that the consensus is that the 100-foot towers that are recommended by staff that seem to be the preference of all the companies we're talking to, and that, as we've seen from the map, provide the best coverage is probably the way we should move.
Okay.
Does anybody
Right,
disagree
And
with that?
the other thing is that, and so when you're going forward and negotiating with those neutral hosts and those carriers, and again, and the idea and the concept is, and this is going to go to a ballot issue, the contingency is ours, not yours.
Yes.
These are firm contracts subject to a vote. If the vote goes, it's done. If it doesn't, no
We're all
harm, no
afraid.
foul, we're out. It's going to be a tough lift, but that's the direction that that I think we need to go in.
I agree.
One quick question on, if we go to the ballot, can we do it this year? Is there enough time? When would it have to be on the ballot?
Well, I'll defer to the clerk for that.
So for the November ballot, which we're already having an election because of council seats, the last day to certify stuff to the county is the first Friday in September. So we do have time to, as far as council actions go, get it on the ballot. The question is how much public outreach you want to do before that, because we are limited, once it's in a council packet, we're limited by FCPA that we can't spend any more city money on it.
Yep.
So we'd have to create a committee similar to what you guys did last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the
I think
other
that's
thing
important too, which is, and again, Katie, just like
Yeah.
you said, but it's a little, on my view, it's a little stronger. The community said they wanted cell phone fixed. We have a solution, and here it is. You're either going to do it
Yeah.
or forever hold your peace.
We're not
End of
problem
discussion.
solving by,
This is it. I mean,
A
this
6,000
is
person
a
committee.
legitimate
Yeah.
solution that fixes everything, but you may not want it. And if you don't, we ain't turning water into wine,
yeah.
okay?
I would agree with everything you said about your checkpoints here. The last one, my only comment is I still continue to say that science should dictate at least where we think the optimum places are. And then if we have to defer only to public property, then we can do that. But I still am not convinced that we looked at private property for the best coverage to eliminate all of those blues.
Well, yeah, I don't know that, that in a lot of ways that's feasible. We just have no idea who would be amenable to that and who wouldn't. And
Where I'm going with that is
I
the
know
high-
the city attorney wanted to,
Just, well, on the timing question, just round back, so you would be initiating a charter amendment via ordinance, and there are specific time limits in the Constitution and state law that govern that. So we'll be, in addition to the very salient points raised by Ms. Gillespie, we would be sure to follow all of that. We're going to want to march through that. A subcommittee, even for you guys to talk with staff, might be something we would want to talk about. There's other provisions in the charter that should be on your radar screen before we actually decide what that amendment should be.
Okay.
I'll need to know more too. So
Yeah.
there's a lot to really map out here.
What I was going to say, Rob, about the sighting of these antennas, that I think almost by happenstance, I don't think we engineered it this way, but the fact that we've got these 3 locations that blanket the city and turn most of that blue, almost all of that blue, to green, which puts us to an adequate coverage level, I think it's very fortuitous for us. And I don't know that we want to go tinkering with picking up these antennas out of public property and try to go negotiate deals on private property when we're solving for something that's not really broken at this point. We have a plan that works and the engineering works. These guys, the engineers looked at it and came up with a good heat map that we're covered in public parks.
Yeah,
Can I make a suggestion that we wrap this up and
Yeah.
we can address this at our meeting at the retreat?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
We do need to move on. All right, it is, thank you very much for coming in for your presentation, and thank you to staff for continuing to move this process
Thanks, Ken.
forward. Okay, it is 6:35, and I will call the city council meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Counselor Eber?
Here.
Counselor Holm? Here. Counselor Wheel?
Happy to be here.
Counselor Sheldon?
Here.
Counselor Blum?
Here.
Counselor McGuire?
Here.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Audience participation. We do have someone in the audience. Oh. Okay. There's no one signed up to participate. There are no members of city boards and commissions. We'll move on to the consent agenda.
Mayor, I'd like to remove item A from the consent agenda, please.
Thank you. So moving on to item 6A. Or no, 6A, so it's removed, and so now, yes, now we're discussing it.
No, I just want to abstain because I wasn't
okay.
here last week.
Okay, move to approve the minutes of the February 6, 2024 meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Aye.
That passes. Moving on to new business, the Highline Canal Natural Resources Management Plan Funding Agreement. Manager Black.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. As you know, the city is part of the Highline Canal Collaborative, the umbrella organization consisting of all jurisdictions along the Highline Canal, plus Denver Water and the Highline Canal Conservancy. So together, we've taken on many successful planning projects, and this one is the latest. So we're hoping to complete this as a joint effort. If my PowerPoint will cooperate. Okay, great. So this is the latest planning effort. It is a natural resources management plan, hoping to drill down even further than we have in the past along the entire length of the corridor for trees, wildlife, and really the ecosystems along the Highline Canal. So the plan will consist of the existing conditions and how to maintain the existing resources we have out there, along with natural resource enhancement strategies going forward, public communications planning, which we're finding as we start some of the hazard tree work is a very important component to communicate to our communities what's going on with the Highline Canal, and O&M structure recommendations as we navigate the transition of the canal, hopefully this year. And the goal is to complete this plan in early 2025. So the total estimated project cost is $600,000. All of the collaborative partners are expected to contribute at varying levels. Our city's requested contribution is $15,000. Greenwood Village, similar to us, has already committed their $15,000. And it's expected that Arapahoe County Open Space is going to contribute the largest amount at approximately $300,000. I'm happy to answer any questions, and otherwise, the recommended motion is on the screen.
Emily, I had a couple of questions. I didn't understand why the agreement didn't have any conditions in it. For example, what happens if they don't get the rest of the money? What happens if they don't spend the money, all of it? What happens if, is that in the underlying collaboration agreement? It just seemed, I just assumed there'd be a condition that they can't spend this until they get everything, right?
I mean, Emily had most of the discussions. We can add something
I
like
think
that.
it-
The RFP's been issued, and I think I don't know, what'd you say, how much? Most of the money's been contributed, right? Go ahead.
Yes, Arapahoe County hasn't finalized their exact amount yet because it's going to be based on the exact bids that come in. But we can add a clause that's similar to that.
It would seem to me that we would want it to say that they, in the event they don't get all of the money, they return this money to us. If they don't spend it within whatever the time frame of the project is, we get our share back. And that they have to use it for the purposes laid out in the.
So it does say,
Yeah.
at least in the resolution part, it does say that no monies dedicated for collaborative projects will be spent in any other jurisdiction along the canal unless authorized by the party.
I realize.
But it doesn't say that they would give it back if they don't get it. So
And
that's-
that they don't
yeah.
get to spend it if they don't get all of the other money. I think it should be in the underlying agreement that we have with the Canal Conservancy. That was my issue more than what was in the resolution.
Right.
So, other than that, I'm fine.
I just got one quick thing, Emily. Just confirm that this is not an annual. We have a bunch of these annual commitments that we make for $10,000 or $15,000 to various organizations that are repeat customers of ours, if you will. This is not a reoccurring line item that we should be expecting, right? This is for a resource plan.
Correct. This is a one-time cost. We do have an annual contribution to the Highline Canal Conservancy that's $10,000 that's separate from this agreement.
Thank you.
And I think the other thing that I wanted to be, that I wanted to point out is because we have a policy that we don't make contributions to nonprofit entities, I wanted to be clear that this is a slightly different situation because we have a memorandum of understanding with this organization to provide services that benefit the city. It's not, so it doesn't exactly fall under our policy around just making contributions.
And the MOU specifically contemplates additional agreements for financial contributions, right?
Yes, thank you. Okay, other questions? Yep, Councilor Holland.
Yeah, just a couple. Just out of curiosity, what's the number of miles of Highline Canal through Cherry Hills versus through Greenwood Village?
I don't know.
About the
Having
same?
just written an
Village
article
off the
about
top of
that
the
for the
same.
crier,
Is it about
it's
the
just
same?
under 4 miles.
Okay, so the 15,000 is about right, because it seems like that's a reasonable thing to do. Who's got, that's a way to look at it. The other thing is in the agreement, minor thing, but I would have sat back and said to use the contribution exclusively for direct costs or costs directly incurred. I would have made sure that it's clear that it's direct costs associated with the plan.
Is that under section 3?
All these changes would be under 3, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? So would you like us to move forward with the motion to approve it as amended per our discussion, or what would you like
But
to
you
do?
could say with, what's our usual language, is direct the city attorney to make changes as directed with council, and provided that the Highline Canal Conservancy approves it, right?
Okay.
Be approved.
I mean, I guess that my question is actually just more about the timing. Should we table this and give you time to go back and negotiate that, or should we?
If council's comfortable making the motion with the language that the city attorney stated, that would be helpful, I think, for the timing of the rest of the agreement, as other jurisdictions are approving at the same time we are.
Okay.
Is the only thing that's at stake right now is what Earl just brought up about direct costs?
And Susan's comment, it's about clarifying that they need to Yeah, the condition upon receiving the rest of the funds and that we get the money back if they.
Yeah, I mean, if I squint hard enough, I think I could probably get myself to make the motion as presented and not worry about what either of you were talking about.
I think we say direct the city attorney to make changes as discussed by council.
Yeah, but the problem with that is, and I don't know if, Kathy, if you think we're running into a buzzsaw here, is that gonna have to go to the Highland Canal, and then they're gonna have to come back to us with something different, and we're gonna be back and forth, round and round on this?
Theory, I don't know that there's going to be, I mean, we gave them a draft of this to review. I don't know that they're going to balk at these conditions. I'll let Emily speak to that, but I think there's a high level of confidence that this money's going to go where it's going.
Well, that's exactly my point, is that this is not somebody new that we're dealing with for the first time today. This is the Highline Canal, and I think I could get myself comfortable with allowing it to get written and approved tonight without having these conditions put on there because they are who they are as they relate to the village. And I don't know that I have any less confidence that it would get done and the money would be spent correctly if we approved this motion as currently presented.
I could just add,
My
you
two
could
cents.
say move to approve, subject to city attorney making those changes. If they balk, they'll bring it back, but they'll be delayed in getting the money. But we'll bring it back if they balk, but if they don't balk, you're
Okay.
done.
Okay.
Then-
Is somebody ready to make that
Yeah,
motion?
go ahead.
Susan?
You're off now.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
I move to approve the agreement with the Highline Canal Conservancy regarding funding for the development of a natural resources management plan, subject to the city attorney negotiating changes as discussed by council this evening.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Is that a voice? Yes, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Council Bill 1, Series 2024, amending Section 16-5-120 of the Municipal Code to adopt the Federal Emergency Management Agency's revised flood insurance study and flood insurance rate map for Arapahoe County and its incorporated areas on first reading. Director Workman.
Well done, Madam Mayor. That's a mouthful. Good evening, Ms. Mayor and members of City Council. I told this to the Planning and Zoning Commission last week when I presented to them on this, and I'll tell you the same. This was likely to be the most straightforward set of text amendments that you ever do to the municipal code. I'm not going to read through all of this word by word. Here's what I would say, is that as part of our participation in the Community Rating System, CRS, right, FEMA, one of the things we're required to do is keep updated maps of the flood insurance rate maps based on a flood insurance study. FEMA says that regardless if changes to a map impact the floodplain within your jurisdiction, you still have to adopt the most current version of that map. So nothing in the village is changing as it relates to the floodplain boundaries, floodplain locations, base flood elevations, none of that is changing. What happened is that there are areas within the county where those boundaries or those elevations did change, but they don't impact the village, but our name is on that map. And so in order for us to be in good standing with FEMA, for us to get full points when we do our audit here in the next couple months, we have to update the code to reference the April 11th map set. That literally is it. We're here because FEMA says we have to adopt the most current map with our name on it, and that's what this does. There
I
is
know-
guidance in our, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I know none of us want a really short meeting tonight, so if you'd like for Director Workman to read the entirety of the,
I have copies of all the flood insurance studies on my desk. It's about this thick. I can go get them.
we need to see them.
Just, I mean, as you were talking, my eyes right to the screen. There's April 10 and there's April 11. Why are those dates different than maybe
Because the maps we currently use will be good through April 10th, and then the new maps will take effect on April 11th. So the first part of it basically says the current maps we have are good until April 10th, and then on April 11th moving forward, we're going to use those maps.
Because the flood risk changes on April 11th.
Well, because we all want to stay here for a long time,
Yeah.
I move to approve Council Bill 1, Series 2024, amending Section 16.5.120 of the Municipal Code to adopt the Federal Emergency Management Agency's revised flood insurance study and flood insurance rate maps for Arapahoe County and its incorporated areas on first reading.
Second.
That has been moved and seconded. This is a roll call.
Counselor Eber?
Aye.
Counselor Holen?
Aye.
Counselor Wheel?
Aye.
Counselor Sheldon?
Aye.
Counselor Blum?
Aye.
Counselor McGuire?
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Moving on to reports. For the mayor's report, I'll keep it rather brief. Two things I wanted to bring up is that, number one, our state representative is hosting a town hall meeting this Saturday from 10:30 to 11:30 at the Sheridan Library. The topic of the town hall is partnerships with local governments in House District 3. And the people invited to speak include the mayor of Sheridan, the mayor of Inglewood, the Denver City Council person who has part of the area in House District 3, and Arapahoe County Commissioner Carrie Warren Gully. Anyone conspicuously absent from that group? It's very difficult to have partnerships, I think, in that context. But I would invite anyone from Cherry Hills Village who's available to attend that town hall meeting and let your representative know how you feel about that. It's Sheridan Public Library. So that's item number one. Item number two is that the various bills that we have been keeping our eye on are dropping. The ADU bill will be in committee next week. And I'm sorry, I'm forgetting off the top of my head.
Next Tuesday at 1:30.
Next Tuesday at 1:30. I don't know that the House committee, I guess what I would say is I don't know that there's an ability to have much of an impact in the House committees. And where there is an opportunity is actually the Senate. The general belief is that given the composition of the committee in the House, no amendments are likely to be entertained, and they're not likely really to entertain any that we're interested in anyway. But in the effort of focusing our efforts where they would be the most effective, I don't know that we need to rally the troops to show up en masse at the House committee hearing, unless we just want to make that statement. And then the transit-oriented development bill was introduced yesterday, today?
I believe it was today.
Today. So that will start its process, and there are more to come. So that's what's going on in the mayor's world. We'll start down here. Councilor Eber.
The only thing I have is that I noticed in the press recently, I think it was, that the city of Lakewood had a meeting that was unfortunately interrupted by some pretty virile, I'll call it hate speech, but it may or may not have been protected. I've spoken a little bit with Al about this already, but you all should have received on your Cherry Hills email, and also I provided to, I don't know if Jay, if you saw what I had already sent, but the Anti-Defamation League has sort of a primer for city governments that I provided to everybody about how to address things should it ever come up on our world. And the reason that it hit my radar was that when we were at the CML legislative session last week, one of the bills I think that was coming forward was to require participation remotely for people taking part in all public meetings. And it's a very broad definition of public meeting. And so in an effort to try and understand a little bit about what we can and cannot allow in, I'll just flat out call it hate speech, under the guise of free speech, I was going to suggest that maybe we take a few minutes during our retreat and get a primer a little bit on what we have to allow versus what we can turn off, frankly, and not hear or remove, or whether our procedures that require a name and identification of an address is sufficient if in fact we ever get to a point where we have to allow remote participation. So it is going on. Periodically, people are being targeted at different city councils. It appears to be something that is happening when there is a particularly contentious, highly public involvement proceeding going on that is getting hijacked by public commenters that have something to say. We even saw it, I think, last Denver City Council meeting. And so I just want us all to be aware of that. And I think the stance that the ADL gave us in their primer is that do not leave these things unresponded to, attack them right away, and say that's not who Cherry Hills is. So, thanks.
Thank you. And just for the record, that bill requiring public participation, remote public participation at all public meetings of any kind is being sponsored by our state representative. And interestingly, the town hall this weekend is not being streamed live. And there's no way to participate remotely. Councilor Holland.
Nothing other than, along with some others here, I attended the CML Legislative Conference last week. Generally interesting overall. The highlights in my mind were listening to Senator Kirkmeyer and Zenzinger, who it is, irrespective of being a Cherry Hills City Council member, being a voter, it's a pleasure to hear two people that actually pay attention and read things and know what the hell they're talking about, unlike virtually anybody else I've ever seen in our freaking state government. And the other highlight was our mayor, who gave a great, and clearly everybody was interested in that grassroots thing. That clearly had everybody really actually on the edge of their seats in terms of how that was pulled off with Senator Bridges. So that reflected very, very well. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
No report.
Councilor Sheldon.
No report.
I would just like to express on behalf of Cherry Hills our condolences to John and Susie Love. If people probably remember, John was on council for 8 years and was, I think, mayor pro tem for 2 years. Susie's was on Board of Adjustments, and I think John Love now chairs Board of Adjustments. They lost their daughter, 42 years old, last week, and I attended the funeral today, and I think expressing on behalf of the city our condolences to the two of them.
I just have a couple of things. One, Mayor, if you have a link for that meeting that we can send out to people that you could maybe distribute to us, that would be terrific. If you don't.
I don't think there is a link because it's not online, but I do have.
If you have some information.
I have an email and I have the information, and perhaps we could send that out to our city email list, just making people aware that this meeting is a public, open town hall, and let people know if they'd like to attend.
I
possible.
I just looked and couldn't find it, but it was a quick look, so.
Did you, yeah.
If you have it, if anybody has it, that'd be great. And then I was gonna, Rob, second what you said is that I think it would be good to at least touch briefly in our retreat on that open meetings issue. Because it sounds like there are structures you can put in place that can limit how people can participate. And then also that we revisit the open issues on the cell coverage at that retreat also. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy City Manager.
I will allow staff to start with Emily.
Just a happy update that we opened our tree planting program for residents on Friday morning at 9 a.m. We are already sold out of trees. So thank you to all the residents that bought trees, and we'll be planting them this spring.
Just couple quick things. One, I want to echo Councilor Holland's compliments of the mayor. I thought you did really well last week, and it showed really well for the village. So well done. The other is there, just like last year, right, there's a lot going on at the state capitol for state housing. Ms. Gillespie has been very good at making sure that the city's website is as up to date as we can keep it with everything as quickly as it's moving. So for those of you that may be listening or watching in the future, you can always check the Cherry Hills Village website to see what the latest is, at least as we know it, what's going on at the state capitol. So that's it.
Chief, no? Director Farman?
Just a quick update. We do have an RFP out right now for outside audit services, and we run a 5-year contract on that. So that RFP ends on March 1st, and we do have about 16 or 17 firms that have at least downloaded the document. So that doesn't mean all of them will propose, but at least there's been quite a bit of interest, and that would start fiscal year 2024. And then we also kick off the 2023 audit next month. So I'll keep council informed. Thank you.
Clerk Gillespie?
We are planning to have the retreat packet ready next Wednesday, the same time as the regular meeting. So we'll be doing that electronic with your iPads like we've been doing.
Thank you. City Attorney? Director Goldie?
All right, I have noted we will add the cell towers and the open meetings anti-defamation issue to the retreat. If you are interested, our EV charging stations are up and operational. We simplified it for staff, not for profit reasons. It's $2 an hour for the first 2 hours, and then it goes up from that. In talking with Blink, the company that provided the chargers for us, we get charged 11 cents a kilowatt hour, and that should work out to just about the $2 an hour. So we're just going to try to keep it at a break even right now and see how much use we can get out of those.
What level are the chargers?
They're level 2.
So that reminds me, there is an interesting bill that was discussed at the CML Policy Committee last Friday that would require, like, perfect timing, would require that all EV charging parking spots be wide enough to accommodate ADA, handicap accessible vans, et cetera. So we would have, all EV charging stations would have to be wide enough to accommodate that. And then in addition, you'd have to have charging sort of meet the same proportion of, ADA to regular parking spots. Some of those ADA spots would have to be EV charging station as well. So ours are probably close enough. They seem almost like conflicting provisions, but given that we don't have a lot of people requesting those permits, it shouldn't have a huge impact on us. I just thought it was ironic that we just built them. And they'll be too narrow. Anyway. Yeah, exactly. Hopefully the chargers are far enough apart to do that effectively. But anyway, I guess unless anyone else has anything to add? No, they already, yeah. Okay, well then we will adjourn at 7:03 p.m. We're killing it.